Good evening, you're listening to the Paranormal Peep Show with myself, Neil Geddes-Ward, and Andrew Chaplin. And tonight we have a very special guest from Twin Souls Radio, which is another show on the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and he is Mr. Philip Kinsella. But before we talk to Philip, we'll find out how Andy is this evening. Andy, how are you this evening?
Hello, yes, a slightly warm evening tonight. How's your weekend been?
I've been busy with all sorts of projects, but mostly I've been painting a commission for a friend. So that is in the sort of early stages at the moment. So it's getting there. It's taking a little bit of time, and I'm sure I'll have it delivered before the month is out. Fingers crossed, depending on how long it takes to dry, because I tend to paint in oils, which is a slow process, but I think it's well worth it in the long run. So what else have you been up to, Andy?
Well, I did some naughty things at the weekend that I probably shouldn't go into on air, but it involves going to certain alternative clubs and just having a lot of fun. But tonight I've actually got into, would you believe it, a debate with a liberal leftist about freedom of speech issues. As most people know, Tommy Robinson is in jail for expressing his freedom of speech. We're slipping into kind of like a communist Marxist state. Got into a bit of a discussion about that. And would you believe it, they deleted my comments. Yeah.
It sounds like someone's, like Big Brother is watching you.
There it is. This is the worrying thing. Oh, and driving back from London, I actually saw the murder site of, I think, the 74th stabbing or murder in London in the past 6 months of just 2018. 74 murders, with the London mayor who's banned stop and search because apparently it's racist. So apart from that, It's driving police officers up the wall because they can't stop and search people that might be carrying knives because it could be deemed racist. And the result of that is the hellhole that now is London. Over the decades, I've never feared or was worried about going into London. I've always gone into London, and yes, I know there's crime that goes on, but I've never feared it. Now I'm actually getting worried. Now it is actually getting kind of a bit Wild West there. The London bubble is kind of imploding on itself.
Sounds like it's all going to hell, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it actually kind of I think it relates to not exactly the paranormal, but in terms of the big picture, in terms of the global conspiracy of creating chaos in order to bring in a new world order, order out of chaos type thing. So this is where I think it relates. Not so much the paranormal, although I suppose you could say the dark forces creating this or instigating this within the world are on a paranormal level. But things are getting dark, and I think people are kind of beginning to wake up to that. I say that because some people are actually getting off their smartphones. I don't know if you heard of this, Neil. Some people are abandoning social media and smartphones because it's doing their heads in, and they're almost going back to basics kind of like lifestyle.
Like using smoke signals and things?
No, just kind of like going back to nature, just walking in nature and just, putting the middle finger up to social media and just, trying to reconnect with people rather than virtual people on the internet, which could be what is causing all the crime wave in the first place. This kind of people winding each other up. And you've got keyboard warriors that, something quite innocuous, just a normal debate, could turn and flare up into something hugely heated. And then if people are tracking each other on Facebook, find out what the movements are and then going after them. That's what I suspect might be happening with all these crazy shootings and stabbings and God knows what else.
What a pleasant world to live in.
So on that joyful note, who have we got as our guest?
Well, our guest tonight is actually joining us from one of the other shows on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Many listeners might be familiar with him. He's been a guest on our show before. It's Mr. Philip Kinsella, twin brother of Ronnie Kinsella, who we had on our show not that long ago. And he is here tonight to talk to us about his new book.
Hello, hi, Andy. Hi, Neil. Lovely to have me on the show. Thank you so much.
Before we before we get onto the specialist subject, Philip, because I know you're here to talk about something completely off at a tangent, what do you think about what we said so far about maybe the kind of the New World Order agenda, or the dark agenda, trying to turn people against people, man against man, man against woman, woman against woman?
Well, my opinion is that the social media network is very much responsible. I mean, you only have to look at the interviews of the creators of Facebook, and they've actually stated categorically that they've created a nightmare. And they realize now that they don't need the heavy men to go in for the kill. People are turning against each other through these little bits of information being planted into the media machine and getting people upset. So understandably, what's happening is that the controlling mechanism of society is very much going forward into this control aspect. It wouldn't surprise me if the powers that be bring in an ultimatum that they wanted in the first place of total control. This is why this is happening. Yeah.
I think that's exactly right. I think they want the destruction. They want society so destroyed that people are screaming out for, if you like, the next Hitler or the next Stalin to come in and kind of like sort it all out. And even I find myself saying we kind of need another Trump in the UK to sort out all this, but we don't want another Hitler and we don't want another Stalin, but we do want to sort out this mess. So it's a bit of a fine line, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, with regards to technology now, I mean, it's known as an addiction. I mean, 95% of the population can't leave their phones alone. And it's got to the stage where a lot of them are using it, every minute of the day. And it has been proven in science that the brain now recognizes that the smartphone or whatever device that you have is an addiction. And if we think about it logically, we communicate verbally or face to face. And now we're more like Cybermen because we are being detached from our emotional connections. And, we're in a real mess now, completely with this technological revolution, which has turned on its head. And I don't feel its true intention was to go this way, not from the creators of it anyway, but obviously the system, as I call it, are very much in control. They know what they're doing. They're clever. They think we're all sheep.
Yeah, ready to go to slaughter, essentially.
Oh yeah.
I mean, can you imagine, Philip? I mean, you might have a different favourite decade. My favourite decade was the 90s. Can you imagine 74 murders in London within 6 months?
It's horrendous. And the other thing that I am really frightened of is the fact of that, your family and friends. You just have to hope that they're going to be safe whenever they go to London on the rare occasions they go there. And I think what's happening is that, dare I say it, certain religious sects now are coming into the fray to use this weapon called prejudice as a means to get what they want. And with regards to that, you're walking down an avenue that is so completely, guarded by all these different peoples with their different opinions. But the fact is, if these murders are happening, which they are, and it's knife crimes, the police need to use any method available to deal with it, regardless of what other people are saying. The police need to go in and check every citizen. It's not about racism. That's just that's a political ruse to get what they want.
It's completely backfired. Absolutely backfired.
Yes.
And unfortunately, get this. I mean, there's police stations closing down all throughout London, and the number of police wanting to leave the service is at its highest ever rate. I know police officers, met officers personally, that want to get out. And that is a dangerous situation. With the spike in crime and police leaving, we are going to have the Wild West. And Parliament will only realise this when people start banging on number 10 and there's no one to defend them. But then again, they might bring in the military. And if they bring in the military, they call martial law. And if they have martial law, they have the New World Order implemented. And again, we're going back into the dark agenda and possibly maybe the dark alien agenda or the demonic agenda. And I'm wondering if some of these murders are actually, and I don't know what you feel about this, Philip, could they be some kind of artificial intelligence program infiltrating people's minds to get them to commit acts of violence? Do you think there's a kind of like a demonic agenda? Are some people being literally in some way possessed by demons to create this? Because it's not come out of nowhere. It's not just kind of like, there must be something behind this.
Well, I think that with regards to your question, certainly there was something that happened a number of years ago that got me thinking, and I think, like many other people, that I'm not too far wrong about this. The alien agenda, or the governmental control of the new Illuminati, or I call it the New World Order, is basically that is evident. But with regards to mind control, experimentation of the mind, we all know about MK Ultra, but there was something that happened on the news not long ago. Well, probably a few years ago now, but I can still remember it like it was yesterday. There was a guy in America that walked into a cinema dressed as the Joker. And it was during this screening of a Batman film. Do you remember that? And he took out a gun and shot all the people in the cinema. Now, I am very suspicious, and I have no way to prove this, but I was under the impression that, you know, this was some type of mind control experimentation, another one, because it stood out from, you know, your normal random attacks, that type of thing. But I still believe to this day that there was something behind that. And I know that the military, or the secret military industrial complex, have really advanced in their levels of mind control, where they're able to stimulate the cerebral cortex through certain wavelengths of energy that's emitted through devices. Now, there's been stories also in America of them, most of the citizens in certain counties being openly attacked by these sounds, or these explosions of sounds, which has, you know, created a lot of pain in their brain, or they feel like they're not in control of things. So certainly, I mean, a lot of the things that are utilized by the system is very much evident when we look at the news. It's like if we go back to 9/11, and you know, you just have to look and search online about Dr. Judy Wood, which I know you're all familiar with, and her research into where did the towers go. She tried to explain basically that the public will look at something on TV but not look at it in the way that other people look at things, because she actually demonstrated through hard physical evidence that those towers were literally turning to dust. But no one saw that at the time. None of us did. And you know, it's these things where you're shown certain aspects of something and think, oh, yes, it's just another stabbing, or it's just another explosion, or whatever. But when you start digging into it and you start looking into it, you think, hang on a minute, this case is very different from this one, and there's something strange about that. And going into conspiracy, the same with Dr. David Kelly. I think you may remember the nuclear physicist who'd committed, yes.
Yeah. The guy who said to his wife, I'm highly likely to be found in a wood dead. They're probably going to murder me. And then a week later it happened.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, most people choose to turn the other way, but real investigators like yourselves, they're thinking, hang on a minute, let's look into this. Let's take a deeper look into this. It's like the UFO phenomena, the spiritual aspect also, the psychic phenomena. And the system, this is what really annoys me about the system, and I've always called it the system, those nameless, faceless bureaucrats who control the pyramid of power. Yeah, they always make us look like we're idiots, and yet a lot more people now are waking up to the realization that we're not idiots. You know, when I was a kid growing up, I remember asking my mum, where was I before I was? And she said, in my womb. And that wasn't good enough for me. And it was only through the death of a grandfather from my stepfather's side, when I was 10, I believe, where I was really affected by his passing. And no one in those days, back in the 80s, talked about life after death. They didn't talk about UFOs. That there wasn't as many conspiracies that had been outed through media outlets like books or online that we have today. So in those days, it was far harder to, you know, understand the subject matter. And I believe that because people now have more access to information, most of which is brilliant, some of which is a bit dubious, I think it's important for you as the researcher, as the investigator, to find what fits with your beliefs, what you feel. And I'm absolutely convinced that that is the way to go when you're investigating. But certainly with regards to these knife crimes, you can see what's happening on a political level. If someone is stabbed with a knife, it's murder. It's intent to kill. And why are the powers that be saying no? Because people are offended by us searching them. I'm sorry, they don't complain about that when you go to an airport and every single person is checked, do they?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah. So, Philip, you're here to discuss a slightly different topic. Where would you like us to go?
Wherever you want.
Well, actually, I suppose what we could talk about is the fact that Philip is a medium and also a UFO researcher. But he also happens to present the Twin Souls radio show on the Paranormal UK radio network, along with his twin brother Ronnie. And both Ronnie and Philip have had some very, very interesting experience over the years to do with the paranormal. Very fortunate, unfortunate, depending on which way you view it. Philip's been involved with Rendlesham research and also mediumship. And what is interesting, Philip, is that you somehow managed to cover both aspects of it. Andy and I have always said that this kind of field is either UFOs or life after death. There's no kind of connecting thing between the two, but you're one of those very unique people that is also a psychic medium and a UFO researcher and also an experiencer. And you've got the unique angle where you can research both and tie them both together from your perspective. So we've been talking about your new book, the A Passage to Eternity.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's... I mean, we're all important. We all have, we're all unique. That's my underlining factor. I always say, I don't care if you're the man with the candle or the queen with the crown, we're all important. There are some people who choose not to be, however, that's their problem. But with regards to me, I was always a bit of an oddball because I couldn't accept the general consensus that we lived and we died and we had a sell-by date. I found that incredibly ridiculous. And when I was young growing up, no one would talk about UFOs. I mean, I remembered a teacher called Mr. Charles at Stockwood High School when we came back from South Africa. He at school lent us these paranormal magazines, and I remembered another teacher saying, "No, you will look after them." And I tell you what, I devoured every one of those magazines, and I was so fortunate to find Mr. Charles, a lovely gentleman, a pipe-smoking chap. Of course, teachers could smoke in the staff rooms then. And he was very much into this, but a lot of people weren't, or, they just thought I was an oddball. But I can tell you that it's been a passion of mine since that time, and I've done nothing. And I swear to you, I buy books all the time. I'm researching. I live and breathe it. Even though I do my day job, I live and breathe this subject. So I wanted to find the truth of soul survival. I wanted to find out whether or not we survived death. And I wanted also to discover aspects of the UFO phenomena, because if you think about it, both of them are a paradox in the fact that we don't have much understanding about them. Even to this day, we can only rely on witness testimony or evidence, as it's called, through psychic means. So I kind of found it very strange that I was involved with UFO research, and then all of a sudden, around about the year of 1998, I started to explore the psychic avenue, and this is all due to a medium I'd gone to see when my maternal grandmother passed over with cancer, because things started happening around that time. So I'm not saying that I'm special, but I guess that each and every one of us has a path in life. We have purpose, we have design, and I believe in order. And I also wanted to discover more about the UFO phenomena. Are we dealing with nuts and bolts construct, or is this a psychological process, or are they interdimensional? And through the many years of investigating and researching, it was only until 1998 that I really began to understand concepts of the human soul survival, the other side, alternative dimensions, and also the big question about UFOs. So it's kind of like a very heavy subject. I'm surprised I'm not in a psychiatric ward, to be honest with you.
Well, actually, thank goodness you aren't. Otherwise, we wouldn't be chatting to you this evening and gaining an insight into your research and your writings and things like that. I mean, the accusation goes around from certainly the skeptical side is that we're just gullible idiots and we'll believe anything we see. What's your take on that?
No, and I don't deal with rubbish. I mean, we've all dealt with that in our times. There are certain things that you look at and you think, in terms of evidence or UFO research, when you look at some, you think, oh, what a load of rubbish, And there are certain things that stand out, and I think that we all have that inward antennae where you're aware that you're dealing with someone who is honest, who is practical. Okay, we may all get mistaken by a certain case from time to time. Excuse me, that does happen. But I get this feeling that when I started investigating the UFOs, I wanted no nonsense. I wanted to get to the bottom of it. And this is all relayed in the book, A Passage to Eternity, through an event that happened to me all the way back in 1989, which I've described in the book, that I'm still trying to work out to this day. What people would call an abduction. Now, in terms of my abduction, if it's called that, because it was so hard to explain to someone that you were taken out of your bed, you found yourself floating outside on your back and being taken outside, being taken up to a UFO, and then you find yourself on a hardened bed, medical bed, with 3 reptiles just moving backwards and forwards in some mist. And they've through this intrusive investigation that I found myself under, where I had been seemingly strained to this bed, and they had placed an implement into the lower part of the anatomy, and I could feel it inside the lower part of my stomach pulsating. That for me was the most horrific, most difficult thing I've ever had to deal with. And I remembered still to this day that the sheer horror of what they call the abduction took a long time for me to deal with, and still to this day it still makes me feel nervous. But because there's a lot more to that story, I've just gone over that very quickly. But when people make jokes about or you've been probed by aliens, it's very disturbing. One of the things I found within media, going back, Andy, also to your question about the media and the system, is that when I have been invited on to several television programs. One of them was with Carlton TV, and they did a live show, and they got me down there. They said, oh, you're a great speaker. So you're on Channel 4. You're great. You're a really brilliant person. Come on our show. And I said, well, what is it about? They said, it's about UFOs, and there's debate about it. You'll be great. So I was chauffeur driven down to the studios one night, and found myself in an audience with Nick Pope. I met him back in America. Georgina Bruni, who wrote You Can't Tell the People, Omar Fowler, and Andy Roberts, loads of other people. But what I found when I was in the green room before we went out was that the producer came up to me and said, oh, this is Philip Kinsella. I know that Nicky Campbell was there. He wasn't doing the show, but Kay Adams Wood, the Scottish presenter of Loose Women, or had been the Scottish presenter of Loose Women. She's nice. I've got nothing against her. She's just doing her job. But anyway, when I was in the green room and I was with Nick Pope, they showed me what they had under the caption of my name, and it said Philip Kinsella probed by aliens. I remember saying to them, hang on a minute, that's degrading. I'm not happy. So the assistant went and got someone else and said, Mr. Kinsella's not happy about this. Okay, they said, we'll remove it. Do you know they didn't? And when we went out on the show, it was a complete farce. They called the show X-Files or X-Fools. And at that point, afterwards, when I was chauffeur driven back, I mean, I could drive, but they wanted to chauffeur drive me back, probably through the shock of the whole thing. It's any wonder. When I was being driven back, I thought to myself, I now understand an ugly part to the media machine. It was quite evident that, Jenny Randalls was meant to go. She didn't turn up, and I wouldn't blame her anyway. But it was quite evident from that moment how the system worked. And I kind of when I watched the show, they sent me the tape through the post. Of course, they were the old tapes, the videotapes. I watched it and I thought, oh my God, they killed us. They stripped the subject apart so that any member of the public at home, sitting at home in front of the TV, would say, "What a load of rubbish." They didn't give us a chance. They didn't give us any chance at all to explain ourselves. To them, it was all a big joke. So from
Yeah.
that moment onwards, I definitely realized I had to check this out. And of course, throughout that, I started discovering quite a few disturbing things on top of why this secrecy is being, with being done, and why the general public are to be doused down and dumbed down, sorry, is the word I would use, into the belief that we're just biological machines with a sell-by date. You come into the world, you're born, you're taught what the system tells you is truth. You work, you pay your taxes, you ask those questions, and then you die. Not with me.
Yeah.
Not with me.
And I
No.
had my own run-ins as well with the media that was quite eye-opening for something quite minor, but was still kind of interesting. So a few years ago, I was getting into things like paintball and stuff, and there was a group of us that went down to kind of like a paintball site in Northampton, and BBC Radio Northampton was actually kind of doing a little report on it, and it was supposed to be a report on a live match of paintball teams, but because there weren't that many people, what they were getting us to do, the reporter was kind of interviewing us as if we were mid-game, and we were told to make noises like battle noises and firing off paintball guns. And so we're going black, 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 and we're going, go on, yeah, go for it, which was all very fun at the time, and it was kind of quite, good humoured, and it was interesting and fun and everything. And then listening to it, it really did sound like a live broadcast of a paintball event that was a bit of fun and everything. But then I kind of like questioned it, and I thought, hang on a minute, we've just fooled the public. We've fooled the public with a radio show that was supposed to be live, supposedly about a real paintball event, and it was just us making noises and the reporter filling in the details. And I thought, for the BBC to do that, it's a little bit off. And that kind of like was a slight eye-opener in terms of like the way even the corporate, the larger corporate media machine works. And I don't know if you've seen, Philip, on there's a YouTube video about CNN faking Gulf War. From the first Gulf War.
I've seen that.
So basically got a reporter saying, Saddam's gas attacks are are imminent, sorry. And then there's a siren that goes off and he puts on his gas mask. And then it turns out he's actually in front of a blue screen and he's laughing and joking with the crew. Basically complete rubbish. So my next kind of like incident in terms of what opened me up to the media machine was when I was first getting into kind of like the spiritual side. I was doing meditations, going to spiritualist development circles, starting readings and things like that. I was quite philosophical and kind of quite into kind of deep thought and stuff. And I contacted the local paper, which was the Hertfordshire Mercury. And at that point, there was kind of like a reporter there who I won't name, but he was an utter arsehole. You might have to bleep that out, Neil. But he's got a reputation for being a slime bag, basically. And he calls me up and he says, Andy, what it was, I approached the paper because I wanted to do like a little column, like a little spiritual column, not exactly psychic readings, but if people have got questions or something, I want to kind of like help. And I gave a few examples of things, like belief systems or kind of things about spirituality and life after death and that kind of thing. And I contacted the paper. This slime bag got back to me, and instead of doing anything to do with spirituality, he just asked for a reading. Now at that point I was kind of quite young, quite naive, and I said, okay, I'll give you a reading. So I gave him a kind of like a basic tarot spread, and would you believe it, Philip, the very next day it was an absolute slating of everything that I do to do with psychics, to do with readings. And I thought, do you know what, that is what I was hoping for, what I was expecting in my naivety, was for them to say, yeah, we'd love you to do a column, that would be great for the local community to kind of like ask questions and maybe have a spiritual discussion. No, it was just complete slating. And from that moment, I realised actually the media is not in support of spirituality. It's not in support of waking up minds. It is in support of dumbing people down and turning them into stupid sheep. So there you go. That's my
How can you explain to people when you're out in the back garden with your grandmother and it is a beautiful day, and then you see a silver orb coming towards you that hung over her head and came towards the apple tree. And, that, again, is something else that really will always stay in my mind as a reality.
Anyone hear me? Oh, sorry. I'll tell you what I did. I muted my speakers, so I couldn't
That's
hear
okay.
responses.
I was
Oh,
just
God.
saying that with regards to the silver orb that I'd seen as a child with my twin brother with our grandmother out in the back garden, I will never forget that day. And I don't. It doesn't bother me if someone says to me, "Oh, you're deluded," or that event happened as all of the other events that I have described in A Passage to Eternity, and I'm not one to gloss things up. I'm very black and white. A spade's a spade to me. But when you're dealing with this phenomena, I've had people saying to me, "Oh, you're this or you're that," and I just think, well, that's fine. You can attack me, you can say what you want, but in reality, I think that when you have one of these experiences, each and every one of us, there's definitely a change. It changes you as an individual. It changes you as a soul. And I really think that we're on a journey. And I think because and that's why I call the book A Passage to Eternity, because I believe that our souls have elected to walk this path. And most of the memories that we have accumulated in past lives or those lives in the spirit world are recorded within our DNA. And I've discovered this just recently, because I used to have these experiences, and I still do, whereby a memory would come into my mind of a place that was not here. And it's not just seeing this flash of realization, it's actually knowing that you're part of something grander. And I know that when I was reading through a biography on C.S. Lewis, the children's author of Narnia, the Professor C.S. Lewis, his biographer said also that C.S. Lewis had gone through these moments of joy. And when I read about his experiences of joy, they matched what I had. And I'm thinking, well, if he's had them and I have them, many other people have them. And in terms of that, without jumping too off the mark here, but with regards to our life in spirit or past lives, I do know that these feelings are from the other side, is that it just takes someone to drop something in somewhere to say, this has happened to so-and-so. And then they find out someone else that says, well, that's happened to me. So I then began to understand that it's not just a single life that we have here. We have multiple lives. And I believe that the essence, our true essence, is still on the other side. And what made me laugh was that, Andy and Neil, is that I heard through the grapevine that the Matrix, the film The Matrix, I'm sure you know about the trilogy of The Matrix. The Keanu Reeves, who starred in it, he was being interviewed by someone. And this person said to him, "Oh, about your films." And he said, "You mean documentary?" So, even actors, like it was Keanu Reeves, wasn't it, who actually played the part of the character in there?
Yeah.
Even they are aware that although this stuff's coming out in fiction, they're like, no, this isn't fiction, this is a documentary. So I think it's great that more and more people are opening up to the fact they're stopping and thinking. The system has tried so hard to dumb them down and saying, this is what you have to believe in. This is real. And they're like, no, because I've had something happen to me, or I have a real strong feeling that I need to go somewhere else. So, it makes me laugh sometimes when people are tripping over themselves, trying to debunk the psychic phenomena as their life after death. And certainly the greatest aspect, the Rolls Royce, the Genesis, the UFO phenomena, which I'm totally well into. Yeah.
Yeah, of course, the UFO phenomena these days is very much kind of marrying with the paranormal and psychic phenomena as well.
Yes, I mean, with regards to the paranormal, you see, everything all has to be pigeonholed, doesn't it? We've got UFOs over there, we've got spirit communication over there, we've got life after death, we've got werewolves over there, we've got black cat. It's ridiculous. I think what they try to do is they try to separate all these aspects into their own single boxes. And I think when you start looking into the UFO phenomena, most certainly what I've discovered through a lot of people who've had encounters with UFOs, I'm still dubious about the nuts and bolts construct of them, although they probably have to appear this way when they come into our reality, is that when a UFO has been seen, there was a lot of residue afterwards, and you'll find that most people report seeing Bigfoot or black cats or strange psychic phenomena follow. So my investigation sort of like took me into areas like, are these things opening dimensional portals which allow these other entities to come through, like ripping open a pocket somewhere, a bag full of water so that some of it starts squirting out. And also the research, Neil, in my book went more into the gravitation of the soul and the interest of why certain aspects of the UFO phenomena is interested in the abduction phenomena, or in us as human beings, as it were.
Now, the interesting thing that I found in your book is that you started off with the story of how you became a psychic medium, but you had no interest in becoming one, or even doubt that you could ever be one, because it was given to you in a reading by another medium themselves.
Yes, I mean, I had no interest in mediums. I mean, I know that my grandmother was psychic, yet strangely, as we've reported before, we seem to accept that. It didn't seem to bother us. But, within the media machine was so powerful that when you used to watch Doris Stokes on TV, it was all like a bit of fun and laughter. And of course, I was a victim of that also, I have to say, by being one of those people who used to laugh and joke about mediums. My brother and I used to say Doris Stokes' friend or hoax. And how wrong I was. I was more interested in the UFO phenomena because at that point in our childhood, something had happened to us. Several things had happened to us, especially to Ronnie, with regards to his experience of going through the top of the house, a Victorian house in Luton, and seeing these doctors, and then seeing this grinning Cheshire cat. And then later on, much later, he'd see this grinning dog staring at him. So, you couldn't put the pieces together. It was all confusing. It was all like, all over the place. But when you start going into the phenomena, you start to discover that, there are such things as mediums, that there are good ones as well. And I happened to meet one, like on The Matrix. I went to go and see this woman. She was young, very attractive, and she read for me. Pearl, and she told me that, you're psychic, you'll be back to see me in 2 years' time. And she told me all this stuff, and I was like overwhelmed. I thought, where's she getting this stuff from? And then when I started to research that, and 2 years later, when activation process, I call it activation, when something happened to me, there was some deaths, and they really affected me. And then I started seeing lights around people, and I seem to know things that other people didn't know. And I thought, where the hell am I getting this from? So I went back to the medium, and she said, right, you're ready. So I do believe that, you don't have to be a medium, but there are certain people that come into your lives that are a blessing. I'm blessed to have all of you in my life because we're all conduits. We're all connected in different ways. We're all important. And this is the other thing, when you get ego involved with it. No. You take ego right out, because where I'm concerned, ego stays outside. But there are avatars. There are people here to guide us. And I found that fascinating. So in answer to your question, Neil, the psychic part didn't come in until much later in my life. And the medium said to me, she said, there is a reason why you have this interest in UFOs and they have an interest in you. Would you believe it? And that's what she told me. And also the development of your psychic ability. She said, you and your twin brother are working towards a grand plan. I haven't found the grand plan yet, I've got to tell you both, but we're supposed to be working towards it.
It's interesting, though. But it's interesting that the establishment won't fully acknowledge the existence of life after death, or mediums or psychics as people to be able to help other people, and yet that the police will use psychics and mediums at a lower level of officialdom to try and help solve these cases. So there does seem to be sort of a semi-acceptance, even if it's just an unofficial thing. Now, this Pearl, she was. Did she help the police in any way in her investigations?
Yes, I remembered that she had worked for the FBI in America. She used to work on cold soul cases where they couldn't find bodies, and they brought a medium in. And she was very blasé with her work, but she was brilliant. And she took me under her wing. So I was very fortunate, because I was very dubious about going to see a medium. And this lady that I knew was insistent that I go and see her. And I thought, oh, Pearl, what a name. But when I went, I covered my name. I called myself Peter. Very scrupulous person I was. I called myself Peter. I made the booking and went to go and see her, and I was completely blown away. And I was supposed to only be in the room for about 40 minutes. I sat in there for 2 hours. She wouldn't let me go. And she said, "You'll be back in 2 years. You'll be back in 2 years." And after that, I went home, and then I was smelling of youth dew. I can assure you that's not my favorite perfume, youth dew. Estee Lauder's youth dew. It's what my grandma used to wear. Apparently it was all over me, and they could smell it. And then my brother went, and then he was knocked for six, so much so he cried in the car. I had to console him. And then my mum went, and then all the rest of the family went. So we became a friend of Pearl's, and we did all sorts of crazy things like past life regressions. She was very good on that. I mean, she took my brother through a very detailed 4 or 5 parts of a past life regressions where he'd seen himself in other lives. One of them I remember him saying about being at a Roman. What do they call them? Is it Colosseum or something? And he was being gladiator. Yes. So she was incredible, and she paved the way for me. And there was another lady that I have to make mention to, Marion Goodfellow. She's a medium, and she took me under her wing later on, and she got me on the stage and the platform, and she dried my eyes when I was frustrated. And I remembered when I had to do my first ever demonstration of clairvoyance, I nearly had a heart attack. I thought only a few people would turn up, and it was packed. And I stood up there. I stood up there in front of all those people, and I can't really say how I felt because it'd be a bit rude on the radio, but I thought I was going to cack myself. Anyway, so I stood there shaking, and all of a sudden, this warmth came to my right. This warm feeling came to my right, and all of a sudden, I don't know what happened. My mouth opened, and I spoke. I can't remember what I said. Only the first reading about this woman's father had passed over, and she just crossed water, and then afterwards Marion gave me a big hug. So I feel it's important. I mean, yes, you'll get mediums who profess they're mediums and they're not. I mean, that happens all the time. It's in every walks of life. Whatever job you do, you'll get that. It's just one of those things. But there were people that I was quite shocked, actually. I sat in a circle, everything they saw was psychic, and I was like, no, that's not the way I want to work. But Pearl and Marion really did work very hard for many years to enhance the ability to focus consciousness. And I'm sure that you're aware, Andy, also that when you're dealing with interpretation, because I've said in the book, A Passage of Eternity, that it's important to be able to interpret information. And, and that was the hardest part to begin with.
It's very subjective, isn't it, Philip? Like, some people, I'll give you a good example actually of the interpretation. It's quite interesting. Myself and a girl that I met on funnily enough, a psychic chat room, were kind of giving each other readings just for fun. And what we were trying to do is kind of like an ESP thing, and we're trying to project something to each other. And try and work out what it was. So we wouldn't tell each other what it was, we'd just project it. So in my mind, I was seeing Cadbury's roses, a box of Cadbury's roses. This was her projecting an image to me. So I said to her, chocolates, is it chocolates? And she said, no, not chocolates. And I said, oh, that's strange. Must be rubbish then. I must be out of tune. So I asked her what it was, and she said, a rose. She was projecting a red rose
yes,
to me.
Of course, yes, I understand.
So that's a perfect example of interpretation. I was thinking box of chocolates, but it was actually, I was supposed to say roses. Now, the interesting thing is was that her subconscious projecting that, or was it spirit helping to do that, and spirit putting that in my mind?
Well, Well, one of the things that I discovered through psychic exploration when I was learning to become what they would call a medium, by the way, I hate the word, I think interpreter is a better definition for it, was that most of the information would come through visually and sensory. So I knew at that point that the human brain that we've been programmed to use by the system was being utilized by another force outside of our dimensional frequency by sending images or impressions. So that use your body as basically as a blueprint for what they want to get through to their loved one sitting in front of you. So I thought, okay, so we are able to get information from another dimension, albeit on a higher frequency. And these lights that I keep seeing around people, which I was seeing, like and still do, like blues, oranges, yellow. I'm colorblind, but I know basic colors, silver. I kept thinking, what the hell is going on here? What are these things? And one of the things I found very interesting with regards to the soul communication is that it's like watching a film. You watch a film or you read a book, and you're taking it all in. You take it all in. You take the information in, and when you've delivered the information to the client and they've gone, they're happy, whatever. I've had some people that have been quite difficult actually. I didn't read for them. Is that you come away and it's like it means more because you've got the residue hanging around you. And when I started researching into the UFO phenomena, and I go back to the abduction that I apparently had back in 1989, seemed almost like a dreamlike quality when it happened. And although I had been left with physical marks, most people were coming forward saying later in UFO research, oh, I've been abducted by aliens. I always thought it was a very physical experience. And I'm thinking, well, why was mine very different? And then when you start going through all the gunk and getting to the reality of it, most of the people that have been abducted say it seems like a dreamlike experience. And I'm like, now we're getting somewhere. Now that's what really interested me, because I was trying to put the pieces to the puzzle that happened to me and comparing them to other people. Of course, when you go back into the 50s and 60s, these encounters with so-called aliens would happen on a very physical level. But did it? If you go back to the Betty and Barney Hill case back in 1961 in New Hampshire, where they had lost 2 hours, you'd find that they'd been driving through the mountains and then they'd lost 2 hours. And yet the experience they had of the abduction was very much like a dream. You see where I'm coming from here. So I wanted to find out.
Yeah, and sorry, Philip. There's also the theory of kind of like time slips. You probably heard of this, where people have visited like garages or hotels that have been long since demolished, and then they go back to try and find it and think, where the hell has it gone? And all the locals say, oh yeah, there was one there, but it's not there anymore. And they too say that it was a surreal experience, like a dreamlike state. Yeah.
So basically, with regards to the psychic element and the UFO element, what I discovered was that those that have crossed over seem to operate on a higher level of frequency, of awareness, and the UFO phenomena seem to operate on a lower frequency, a negative frequency. Well, I haven't dealt with any good ones, so I wouldn't be able to report on that, the good ones. And then I started to look into the research and think, well, you know what? People that have these experiences of near-death experiences where they leave their body, they go down a tunnel of light, they communicate with their loved ones telepathically, everything seems quite real, and then they come back and they lose time. Now, looking at the abduction phenomena, it happens in exactly the same way, except on a more negative level of vibration. So my research took me to the point of thinking, okay, so, we've been led to believe these crafts are physical in construct. They come from another planet. I wasn't so sure at that point. And I will make a note here, Neil, that in 1996, some years after the initial abduction that I had in 1989, I had an experience where I had a download. They call it a download. I didn't know what you'd call it then. I had been at work, mulling over the abduction phenomena, wondering why this happened to me, how it was done. And all of a sudden, in a moment of flash of insight, it's almost as if I had all the answers. And I grabbed a piece of paper at work, pen and paper, and I furiously wrote this all down. And I went home and I thought, I've got the answer. And it was to do with the human soul, that, certain aspect of the occupants within the UFO phenomena were interested in the human soul, in reproduction, and also in us, and that leveled out to a much larger picture of what we are dealing with here. And of course, most people in the UFO unit will only deal with old cases or cases. You've got to look into it. You've got to go into the metaphysical aspects of it, because I think what we're dealing with here is not just the ordinary nuts and bolts construct. I think there is a spiritual element that's connected there as well, and that does have something to do with the human soul. And of course, as you know, my speciality, not that I'm a specialist, no one can be called specialist in this subject, but my speciality is an interest in the greys, because that's what I've experienced. So I started to research further and further into the abduction phenomena, how it was done, how they do it, why they're doing it, where they are, where they come from, why they while they're doing their operations. So it's kind of like, a very heavy subject, but I wanted to, in the book, lay this all out so that I could get my thoughts out clear of what I think's really going on here.
There's something that comes to mind, actually, is that I've been recently talking to one of the team of Heavenly Voices, who are the Weymouth Paul duo, who do some excellent readings via their spirit communication board. And Andy, one half of the duo,
yes,
he was basically telling me that he had had an encounter with a spirit in his hallway once when he came home, and he actually saw this spirit man or form standing in the doorway, and he said that he could see sparks coming out of his body, and he said like a children's sparkler. And when when I read your account in your book of your friend Gareth, who had passed to the spirit world, and you said you'd come home and you saw him standing, I think, in the conservatory doorway, you said a very similar thing.
Yes.
You said that you saw him also waving at you, but also he also had sparks coming out of his body as well, which is a very interesting thing. It shows that when spirits do appear on our earth plane, there's a phenomena that can be described as this sparking or arcing or whatever you want to call it, and it kind of shows that we're joining the dots here, and we're definitely sort of seeing some sort of phenomena, and it can't be put down to imagination, because both of you have had exactly the same kind of sighting of a spirit like that.
Yeah.
Now I understand that you got a technique from a book, Raymond Moody book.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, though, that, I, like yourselves, I just report the truth, and I don't dilly-dally around with stuff. I just get to the point. That's all attributed to Dr. Raymond Moody, because I found one of his books in a bookshop, just fell on the floor, called Reunions, a very good book. And he talked about how to communicate with those that crossed over, and I was desperate. So I did something called the mirror experiment, which where you get a mirror and you put it at an angle, you sit in a chair, darkened room, and you're not supposed to see a reflection in it. You're supposed to think of the person that you want to come through. And of course, nothing happened really. So I put the mirror away and forgot about it. And that incident with Gareth happened not long afterwards when I came home from work, absolutely correctly, sat in the kitchen, and the glass that we have in the conservatory made it, because it was dark outside, made it look like a mirror. And of course, that then, in the conservatory, the other glass, you could see there was someone walking back here. You can't get into the property except from a garage door. The garage is next to the property, and the gate is locked. It's a fairly secure place, and I couldn't believe it. But I did ask that request from him just prior to his passing. I said, you've got to do this for me. I thought he was going to punch me, but he kind of like, he said, well, how do you expect me to do that? And I said, I don't know.
Ooh, looks like we're we're losing Philip a little bit over Skype.
Of mirror gazing, or scrying as they call it, is that he'd met his long deceased mother-in-law that he didn't get on with very well, and she had actually floated into the room and actually mentally spoken to him. But as I said in the book with Gareth, there was no mental communication; it was just all visual. And I feel a point from him to say, "What are you worried about? This is real." So I was like, "Wow, that's incredible." And that's why I documented that as a very unique connection with someone who'd crossed over. And people say, "Oh, it's because you wanted to see it." I beg to differ. The whole experience itself, led me down this whole area of research that I never believed that I get involved in to this day. But I'm after the truth. That's all I want is the truth. I don't care, as I said before, what form it comes in. And I'm looking for my own truths. And I think your truths, where you find them, will help other people, because I'm very empathic on that level also. When I was writing the book Sky Crash that I co-authored with Brenda Butler, I'd sit in the kitchen and the door to the hall was open. And I can tell you now that I saw this military guy running towards me and just disappeared. And I was so shocked. So I kind of got this idea. I don't know why he was coming towards me. And then you get into the area also of remote viewing that I'm sure you're aware of. And I didn't think at that point that anything I was writing was specific in detail or something that, is going to be completely revolutionary. Or I was just writing about Brenda's life and about all the stuff that happened at Rendlesham, which I also got involved with, which is another completely, totally strange event, with meeting up with most of the people that was linked with the Rendlesham UFO event in 1980. And then, of course, my own sighting of one all those years later, summoning one, which you know about anyway, Neil.
Yes. Yeah. Very, very interesting sighting and an experience you had there. Anyway, gentlemen, we're coming to the end of part 1, so I'd just like to say thank you very much to Philip Kinsella so far for joining us, and please do join us again in part 2 after these messages. You're listening to the Paranormal Peep Show.
Now pay attention, 005, Michael Caine. I understand you've been in trouble with those pesky Russians again. What have you been trying to sell them this time?
Look, I've got a box from eBay, and it looked to me, as I supposed to know as a bloody nerve agent, it said on the side, raspberry vape.
Raspberry vape? Oh no, this can only be one thing. We'll have to create a distraction. Time for the Paranormal Peep Show.
Trump! When I said release all the JFK files, I meant release all of them! Totally! Don't hold anything back! We need the public on our side to show that we are all in this together.
One moment. I just got to safety pin back my hair. Oh, that's better. Look, I took a look at the files, and your name keeps coming up as the third gunman, okay? So that's why I held back.
Me? The third gunman? There must be some kind of mistake. Oh, yes, I vaguely recall it now. So very long ago, I was out hunting and pointed my gun the wrong way. Well, we tried to distract me with that fake moon landing, but Fox News and the blithering idiot Bart Sibrel kept knocking at my door.
Well, I have 2 things to keep the population distracted, okay? The first one is the Paranormal UK radio network.
And what is the second?
Releasing photos of me and Piers Morgan in the locker room together. That's going to be beautiful.
I think I prefer the first option. Listening to the Paranormal UK radio network. Release the hosts.
Welcome back to the Paranormal Peep Show, and I'm here with Andy Chaplin and also our guest of Twin Souls Radio, Philip Kinsella. Now, Philip, I was, as I say, I'm about halfway through your book right now, but one of the things that did interest me was the experience where you had kind of gone out of your body and appear to go to the spirit world, for want of a better word, I suppose, and you met with your late grandfather, Grandad Jim Kinsella, I believe, and there was something to do with a windmill in this particular experience?
Yes, James Patrick Kinsella. He was the grandfather to my stepfather, and he was a very generous man, larger-than-life guy. I mean, he was typically Irish, loved his whiskey, loved his horses, but a very smart and generous man. Always used to spend lots of money on both of us and buying us lots of presents and toys. And when he died, I was very shocked. Now, years later, I had an experience that I've never forgotten, where I've been laying in bed, woke up one Sunday morning, and all of a sudden I felt myself freeze, and I found my, I suppose you'd call it astral body or soul, shooting up into the sky. And I found myself in this, looking down upon this metropolis. It was a beautiful building, and there was a red horizon. There were lights on in the building, but I couldn't see anyone. And I just hovered there, and I thought, well, this is the most beautiful place I've ever seen. I mean, it was just seemed to pull me. And then all of a sudden, I was pulled up further, and I found myself in this beautiful world full of poppies and a beautiful blue sky. No sun. That's something that did puzzle me. There was no sun, but I found myself in this land filled just with poppies. And looking around, I saw this windmill, and no sooner had I seen the windmill, the masts on it weren't moving. I thought about the windmill. I was there at the door, and I knocked on the door, and the door opened, and there was my grandfather, and he was standing, looking very well. He'd passed with a massive heart attack. He looked very well, and he invited me in. It was a simple, big circular room with pictures of horses along the walls. He loved his horses. I remember 2 of them that he had that were very prominent pictures that he always kept. And there was a lady sitting at the table drinking some tea. and she had her hair in a very different than I thought with regards to my grandmother. I never met my grandmother, his wife, never met her. And I didn't know who she was at that time. And she was sipping tea, she was smiling. My grandfather said, I love you, son, and I'll always be here for you. If there's anything you need, I'm terrible extra. Yeah, I'll always be here for you. He was happy to see me, and I was so happy to see him. And I gave him a kiss, I think, and on his cheek and said, love you, Granddad. Still makes me feel very emotional when I think about it. And I then found myself back outside looking at the windmill, and then I just seemed to descend very quickly, saw this city again, and then was back in my body. Now, what's interesting is that not long afterwards, my stepfather invited us over to his house because obviously he's no longer part of our family. And we decided to watch some old film footage of that he'd recorded on, the old cameras, silent cameras, and the black and white ones. Yeah. So he used his dining room wall for this cine film thing, and it was rolling around. And suddenly I saw my grandfather and this lady dancing with him. And I said, I recognized her, and I said, well, who's that lady? And he said, well, didn't you know that was your grandmother? Well, I didn't recognize her. The only time I remembered seeing her as a child, I didn't really know her. She suffered a stroke and she was in a hospital bed. She had a bowl haircut. She was in a terrible state. I as a kid, I didn't really connect with her or recognize her at all. And I thought, well, I've seen her. I didn't tell him that. He wouldn't believe me, his son's met his deceased grandfather, and now he recognizes the grandmother who was sitting in the windmill. So I kept my trap shut. I said, I won't say anything. But it astounded me. And I remembered thinking, I've met her. I've seen her as she was in that film. She didn't speak to me in the windmill. She was, just happy to see me, I suppose, drinking her tea, because we never had any real emotional connection because of her illness. But anyway, I kept thinking about the windmill. Why would my grandfather show me a windmill? Why would he be in this windmill? He never liked windmills. He never connected with them at all in any way. And so I certainly didn't have any real interest in windmills until I remembered when we were kids and my stepfather had made my brother and me out of a Meccano set with lights, this electronic windmill. And I remembered seeing that sitting on the side with its lights going around and thinking, wow, that is amazing. And I remember my grandfather coming to visit in his lovable way. And he was very intrigued with what his son had created. And I thought, my goodness, Granddad, you're so clever. You did this. You made me visit you in what I would assume was a part of heaven or a dimension. You were in a windmill, and you've shown me your wife that I wouldn't recognize until later on. Do you see what happened here? He's kind of like giving me the proof and then let me find it afterwards. So that was the most astounding experience, and one I still can remember to this day. I mean, as I said, I never knew my grandmother, my James's wife, only that she was ill. And as a child, we used to go to see her at hospital, and she was in no state. I won't go into detail because it's too upsetting. But the woman that I saw in the windmill was very different from the lady I used to see laying in this bed, and so that was my first real indication of some form of otherworldly contact from deceased members of the family. He seemed happy.
Now it's interesting you mentioned about the poppies in that experience.
Yes.
My own grandfather, he passed the spirit world, and just before he passed the spirit world, he said that he could see loads of poppies, and he actually thought he was in France. So it's interesting that your granddad Jim had a similar experience, or you yourself had seen it.
Oh.
So the lady that was with him, that when he passed the spirit world himself, she said that he had an interesting tale or two with regarding his own wife that had come back to collect him.
Yeah.
And apparently she was sitting in the chair.
Yes.
And sort of saw him or something.
Nan. She was called Nancy. Her name was Nancy. Nancy Armett. We loved her. But she was known as Nan. So not to confuse readers or listeners, Nan of the book. Nan, we just called her Nan because it was easier, and she was like a Nan to us because we never really knew our grandmother from Patrick's wife. But anyway, she told me this very amazing tale that after Grandad had died and we'd gone to the funeral, it was all very somber and just surreal. She sat us down and she told us this story about that she'd been in the living room with Jim because he lived in a flat adjacent to hers, and she would always pop over. They became best friends and she looked after him, and they'd been sitting in the living room, both of them, and suddenly Patrick said, "Oh, Nancy, the doorbell's going. It's Catherine." Catherine was his wife, and she said, "Don't be ridiculous, Jim. She's been dead years." He said, "No, go and get that door," she said. So anyway, she went to go and get the door. There was no one there. And then when she came back, she went to go and sit back in her chair. And he said, "Don't sit in that chair. Catherine's sitting there." And she was perplexed. And then he got up, went to the bathroom, which was in a small hall through the corridor. And as soon as he came out, he dropped down dead and had his heart attack. So obviously he'd been visited by his wife, his late wife, that come to get him. And I remembered that story very well. Nancy was a beautiful lady who looked after Grandad. I loved her dearly. Lovely lass, and her family as well. But never forget that story. That's in the book as well, I believe. I put that in there as well, yeah.
It's interesting, actually, because, I mean, although when a medium gives a reading and things like that, or you get information from the spirit world, sometimes it's more of what is said afterwards that has more of an impact than the actual message that comes through.
Yes, I mean, yeah, all the readings I've done, most of them, the client will tell me afterwards of the strange things that happened, and this is stuff that people don't get to hear about. You know, when you're there and you're dealing with real people, and you've read for them, and then they're telling you the stories afterwards of their loved one reaching out to their deceased partner, or they suddenly turn up, or their friend, sister, brother, aunt, uncle, whoever. It's incredible, and this is why in Dr. Raymond Moody's book Reunions, I admire that guy's work so much, because a lovely soul, he was trying to show people that it's not a big deal. There's no big hang up about it. You know, it's in more cases than not a natural process, and more times than not we are met by our loved ones or our friends or associates who have crossed over, because your mindset is they're able to tune into your vibrational frequencies that's on their level, whereas most people are kind of like, you know, so much in grief, bless them, or they're so negative that those on the other side can't get through to. So sure, it's a very normal process. It's, you know, people used to use it as ghost stories, or like, you know, but it's a very real experience, and it brings a lot of comfort. It's certainly brought a lot of comfort to me, because unlike my grandmother and my grandfather from my mother's side, who, let me tell you, I loved beyond love, I wasn't upset with their passings because of all this previous stuff. So I guess this was all cushioning me for the real blows later to come, because at my maternal grandmother's funeral, you know, Ronnie and I were both giggling and laughing behind our handkerchiefs because people thought we were crying. But she made Ronnie promise 3 things. She said, firstly, before she was dying of cancer, before she died, she said to Ronnie, "I want you to promise me 3 things." She said, "I want you to look after your mum. I want you to carry on with your writing, and I don't want you to cry at my funeral." And Ronnie said, "Grandma, I can't promise you the last one." And we were so distraught. And I remembered my grandmother came to me even then, before she died, about 10 minutes before she died. That's in the book as well as a vision. And she absconded me by saying, "Why are you crying? Why are you crying?" And I was in bed in the early hours of the morning crying. And then she showed me in my mind a picture of her holding me and my brother as babies. And then the image went. And then the phone rang 10 minutes later. She'd crossed over. So I knew at that point that all of these messages, all of these connections, all of these amazing experiences were, going forward to tell me it's okay. You don't have to cry. We don't want you to get upset. This is a natural process. And this is what I wanted to relate to people, to say it's, although we still mourn and we cry, that's important. That's very important. But, you know, with certain things, they're like saying it's no big deal. It's fine.
And you'll probably corroborate this as well, Philip, that when a spirit crosses over, it's almost like their consciousness or what they feel comfortable in terms of the surroundings is what's given to them. So with the poppy field, somebody that's been to France even in a wartime situation, maybe the poppy field would have given them some kind of comfort, even with all that crazy, military activity going on. And there's so many different instances of different things that people experience. Some people experience getting on a train and going on a journey. Some people it's the tunnel of light. Some people it's just a door opening. And you probably come across this yourself, Philip, of people coming in and kind of being taken away by loved ones in circumstances that they feel comfortable with.
Yes, I mean, you can't take away the pain. You can't take away the hurt. That is still evident. I still cry now. Sometimes I get a little bit upset privately, or if I'm listening to music, whatever. It's a natural process, and it's part of the healing procedure. We're not robots, but I knew that my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, my mum's mum, because she was so strong, that she was adamant that we wouldn't cry at her funeral, because she was the world to both me and Ronnie. She was like she was tiny. She was an amazing lady. Like most of our relatives that we connect with in our lives, it's very important to each and every one of us. So I knew she'd get her way, because Grandma always got her way. So she was even conspiring, even when she'd passed over, because when I went to go and see Pell for the first time, who do you think was there? She was the first one there. And then she kept coming through other mediums, through the media circuits that we used to go to and see all these mediums. And I remembered people would groan thinking with a different medium, oh, it's their grandmother again. But then after a while it stopped. And I think because my grandfather has now passed over, I was with him just not long before he passed over to the other side, and he was in a very bad way, and me and he had a few private discussions. He'd read my book, Reaching for the Divine, because he was a devout church goer and very religious. We tried to keep that book away from him, but apparently he told me one Christmas Eve in the lounge, he said, do you know, I've read one of your books, Reaching for the Divine. I remembered my heart was in my throat, and he said, bloody good book. And then Grandad said that I told him something that no one else knew, because he said to Mum, and I can't remember it, but when he was dying and he was in his hospital bed, he grabbed my hand so hard, and his look, because he'd had 2 near-death experiences, he told me, throughout his life, he told me. And I knew the look, and I said to him, Grandad, just go. I said, you want to be with Grandma, just go. So, even those situations are very hard, but it's so beautiful to know that you could be there, or they connected with you. We see each other, most people see us in, and then we see them out. And I think that's important to every single one of us who have loved ones who are going through the process of mourning or losing someone. It's so hurtful. It really hurts. And people have this thing, they say, oh, you're a medium, it shouldn't really bother you. But it does. I'm still human. I'm an empath. I still feel the pain of that loss. And I think that's very important, because if you're not utilizing your emotions, how you feel, then it's not going to work as well. So, it's really lovely when you're doing readings for people, because you know that you've had confirmation from your loved ones, like you, Neil, and I'm sure you, Andy, have had confirmation through other instruments of your loved ones' continual survival beyond this conscious realm.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting. In the readings I've had, you don't really get much information about where they're residing. Where is the spirit world? Is it another planet, another plane? They don't seem to describe that. I remember when I did have a reading with Heavenly Voices, the Dorset duo, I did ask my mum, what's it like in the spirit world? And the only word that she said was, it's lovely. And really, that was all I heard about it.
Well, no, I have myself personally, through my own personal experiences, but with the deceased, we call them deceased. They give no indication of God. They give no indication of religious ideologies. They give no indication of what they're doing. Now, what's interesting is that I thought long and hard about this, and I thought, well, what good would it do us here? You don't see them tearing each other apart through their varied belief systems. I have this understanding now from spirit that they can't kill each other like we can here, and that because they are elevated back to their full awakening, it doesn't really bother them. Now, talking about the other side, I have seen the other side. I have documented that near the end of the book, and I can tell you that the total separation of soul from this realm to the other side is a very brief interlude. There's really no pain whatsoever. What I will tell you about the other side, from my understanding, if I can use words, because words fail. Words are two-dimensional. The feelings and impressions that you get over there is much more than what we get here. It's kind of like we're shut off here. But when you're on the other side, there is no time. And the other thing that I found very interesting with the other side is that it's like you're fully awake. And this awakening process that you have is a remembrance of who you are, of what you represent on a spiritual level. It's not like holier than thou. It's a very normal process. And yet what really shocked me more than anything was this concept of time and eternity. You can taste it, you can feel it. And when you're there, you get the feeling like you're falling in love. It's like these feelings are maximized. And you know, coming back, it's like, oh my God, you know, you're shut off. And that's why, going back, Andy, to your question about, you know, media outlets, mobile phones, our senses are being dumbed down. We're being shut down by the system because people are now beginning to get in touch with these so-called hidden abilities that were very much evident in our antediluvian cultures and societies of the past. And this led my research into further areas of finding out that, you know, we're just walking one big lie, and a lot of the history has been hidden from us, and that is evident.
It's interesting, Philip, because you said earlier that we're not robots, but I actually think the system wants us to be robots.
Oh, of course, absolutely.
I think that's where this is going.
I
think that's the whole transhumanist artificial intelligence, which of course is being hailed as the ultimate goal for science. Oh, wouldn't it be great to be merged with artificial intelligence? What a nightmare that would be, actually.
Well, they're selling the idea now. Look at the chipping program. People thought that was a load of rubbish years ago. They subtly introduced it into pets. Or what if you lose your dog or your cat or whatever? They're now doing that. Now you're seeing it in people in offices. Oh, I've got one on iSmart. Look at me. Well, I can assure you, going back now to the system, that people used to laugh and joke about the Illuminati and about, you know, or what a load of, it's all conspiracy theorists. And as we know, conspiracy theorists is a psychological weapon to turn the finger of doubt upon the inquiring mind. The system has now stepped up their agenda because they know that certain people are getting smart. Now, what's interesting, I will tell both of you this, is that I had confirmation from a person who works for the FBI. Yes, I won't mention no names. And I will tell you that I said, well, you know, they knew about my interest in UFOs and psychic research. And I didn't really say much about that. And they said, this person turned around to me and said, well, how do you know that they haven't got files on you? So I'm like, oh, I never mentioned anything about that. So I'm under the impression, no ego here. We're all important, but I'm under the affirmed impression that people like yourselves, all of us, are being monitored. And the reason that we're being monitored is because we're thinking outside the box. And why are we thinking outside the box? Because thinking outside the box is dangerous territory. I will tell you something else that made me smile, and it really did do it for me. I came out from work and I walked down the high street, and there were these young kids, you know, just young kids. And they're all standing in a square, and they had the anonymous masks on. And they had these screens and these banners saying control. And I had to smile. I walked past thinking, you know, that is absolutely admirable. There are young people here, and they really understand what's going on. And I have to joke with both of you because we have to make it a little bit light-hearted. You know, Anonymous, they do their programs, don't they? And they put on these things on YouTube, don't they? I'm sure you've seen them, haven't you?
Yeah, I know of Anonymous because my son was a bit of a fan for a while.
Yeah, well, my brother and I joke. We do love the Queen. You know, I don't care what anyone says. I do love the Queen, bless her. But we said, wouldn't it be shocked if they ripped the mask off and found it was the Queen under there? Oh, bless her. I should probably
Philip, I would be mortified if we weren't on some kind of list, to be honest.
Well, I mean, the thing is, though, that going back seriously into the the Queen's got a sense of humour anyway, God love her. But going back to what you were saying with regards to these files, I remembered that I'd spoken to a lot of UFO researchers before on the phone, and one of them used to be ex-CID. And he said to me, Philip, can you hear those sounds on the phone? And I said, yes, I can. And he said, do you know what they are? Now, this guy knows what they are because this guy's involved in UFOs, even though he was part of the CID network. And I said, well, are we being listened to? And he said, yes, we're being recorded. But now, of course, it's so easy. They don't need to, they can use it through satellites or, spy mechanisms. Everything that we use today, everything we look on, whether it's Amazon or whatever news thing, it's all monitored. They know what you're looking at. So they kind of like get this picture about you. And it makes me laugh about all these new data protection procedures coming into effect because the system is doing exactly the reverse of what they're telling us, the cattle.
Oh, yeah.
They've got their fingers in all the pies. The big brother, they can see everything. They know everything about you, probably know where you've been, what you're doing, what you're looking at, what your interests are. So, you know what, I'm wise to all that. It doesn't bother me. I've got nothing to hide. So it's like, don't do this and don't do that. I don't care. If I want to look at the site on UFOs or so, I'll go on there.
My philosophy is, well, do you know what? Maybe they'll actually learn something, the people that are doing the listening. Maybe you've got like a little dark suited man with a little pencil moustache in a little dark room listening to what we're saying. And, the start of it is just told, just sit there and just listen to this and just record it. But maybe some of it will sink in. Maybe he'll actually think, I've got children and grandchildren. I don't want them to grow into a communist Marxist state.
Well, I will tell you something also as well here, which is very, very important. You'll find that most of these military guys, most of the people who are involved in these secret covert operations, they themselves don't know who is governing at the top. And you will find more times than not that these people will come out of the arena completely, totally against what they were doing. And this has happened time and time again, where they're unfortunately, their strings are being pulled. They don't know whether or not they're going to get their pension or whether or not their lives may be at risk or their family. So the system knows how to use psychological tactics to control people. But eventually, and you're correct, Andy, is that eventually that person wakes up. And even then they're monitored. There's loads of examples of these things happening. But I can't
remember where I heard it from, Philip. But I think the police had a bit of a problem whereby they would infiltrate groups like CND, Greenpeace, animal rights activists, etc. They'd infiltrate from a police perspective. But the problem was they kind of like the agents went native. In other words, they ended up. No, yeah, and they ended up actually agreeing with the cause. Once they were presented with the evidence, they were shown the atrocities that are going on or the danger, the damage to the environment. They actually thought, these guys have got a point. And then they kind of like almost forgot that they were kind of like as a role as an undercover police agent. And they had a big problem about this consistently happening. And you're right, Neil, some of them actually ended up marrying kind of like the people they're supposed to be spying on.
That's right, and probably gave away all their nuclear secrets in the progress. But the thing is that, despite what the underground, i.e. us, find out about things, you'll always get the upper echelons of society or the those that control the media and the information will always twist it and turn it to their advantage to make us look idiots. And, we'll be confined to the very corners of society, of information, and they'll always push their agenda, whether it's through TV, radio, magazines, or even the internet. You'll always find the official version always plays down what we perceive to be the truth.
Oh, yes. It's like going back to the Roswell case in 1947. If you go onto Wikipedia, you will find their definition of what happened. They state basically that a module weather balloon crashed as opposed to a disk. Now, we know to a degree that information is false. If they had put in the press a flying disc had crashed, well, people believed it. And this is where the controversy of the Roswell crash happened. Just giving one example of when all this UFO cover-up really, really started, because they'd released a statement saying, they have the Air Force have in their possession a flying disc. Then immediately, not long afterwards, they retracted the story by saying that it was they were mistaken. It was a mogul weather balloon. Now, that at that point, that was the inception of disinformation. In those days going back, it was far easier to cover up a story like this because you didn't have access to media that we have today, where you can get it at the click of a finger. So at that point, the public then thought, oh dear me, because the whole world got to know about this, when that statement came out about the army of Roswell having their possession of flying discs. That went all over the world, and then they couldn't deal with it, and then the army came forward and said, no, it's just a flying, it was just a mogul weather balloon as opposed to a flying disc, and that is where it started. So at that point, the military then built up this whole process of disinformation. They knew what to do. And I think that was done through the Majestic documents as well, although there's some suspect about them. But there's also the legitimacy that certain high-ranking government officials, colonels and so on and so forth, especially Colonel Philip Corso, were involved in that program years and years later on. So I can see how they do it, and if they were to put on the television today and said on the 6 o'clock news or 9 o'clock news or whatever they got, and they say, well, it's been proven that there is life after death, and it's carried on, then everyone would be like, wow, that's amazing, they believe it. But there is a reason why the system does not want people to believe in UFOs, in folklore, or in life after death. There is a very good reason, because they want us as robots. They want a society that doesn't want to think outside the box. And there's all this other stuff's coming about the use of free energy. And this is what, when we go deeper into the subject of, UFOs, you'll find that this is all turning on its head with regards to a secret space program, which I do believe totally, and also free energy. And this is where this is leading, because you'll find that people who have discovered new techniques of being able to deliver energy for next to nothing, they are destroyed completely. You've heard this many times, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, there was a thing back in the late 80s to do with cold fusion, where these, I think they were biologists or physicists, I can't remember, believed they had discovered cold fusion, and they seemed to be getting somewhere. And it was announced publicly, but then certain powers that be came in and basically poo-pooed it and wrote the whole thing off. And that's happened time and time again with people that invented energy-free cars that just run on water or similar kind of technology, hydrogen and things like that. And so these things are soon pushed down and suppressed. And now, it's my opinion that if life after death was officially announced, then it would throw the whole world into a quandary, because you wouldn't be able to do half the things that you're doing now and getting away with it, because of the fact that life after death communication would expose everybody to what they really are. And this is why I believe things like mediums and psychics and things are kind of pushed to the corner and suppressed. Again, in the Bible, they were done many years ago with that. I mean, there is this thing that I've been talking about recently called the soul phone, supposedly a communication device that should be able to communicate us with the spirit world. But I can't really see that becoming a mainstream tool like a cell phone, where we could communicate with late auntie, grandma, or whoever it may be.
That comes into that's brilliant. That comes into effect with regards to the experimentation of afterlife communications. And I will tell you, there was a great book that I read, and I still have, called The Ghost of 29 Megacycles by John G. Fuller. Now, John G. Fuller, yes, he also wrote The Interrupted Journey, which was the book that blew open the case on a wider level of the Betty and Barney Hill case. But The Ghost of 29 Megacycles, there's some scientists in there who had perfected through Radio Luxembourg some form of spirit communication where they could have one-to-one conversations with the deceased. Now, Edison, I know, was a pioneer, the scientist into spirit communication. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle also, as we all know, was heavily into spiritualism, as with Sir Oliver Lodge and many other pioneering researchers. But the thing is, though, that all of those came to nothing and were subsequently shut down. I totally agree with you, Neil. The idea of having a one-to-one conversation with a departed loved one verbally, or they would perhaps be able to, like we use a TV set to break down the signals that's coming through from the ether, that they will maybe be able to develop a device where we are able to communicate with our loved ones. Now, I know there's been some fraudulent activity with regards to some researchers proclaiming this is the case, but I am absolutely convinced you're right. If the system knew that this was possible, then this would open up a whole gate, a gate literally of overwhelming opposition, where certain things have happened, as you've said. You know, what happened to Lord Lucan? You know, what happened to Princess Diana? Was it murder or was it an accident? I still feel that was murder, and many other things. So yes, I totally agree with you in effect to that. And also we've got to think about it being misused as well. That's another thing. Like everything else in technology is misused. All of those souls on this planet who do want a better world, who do want to understand that we are just walking a passage through eternity, thus the title of my book, because all of us are in search of our own truths. Unfortunately, our planet has been hijacked, and I'm absolutely convinced it's being used as some form of prison planet for souls. I'm not saying that all of us are prisoners here, but what I'm saying is that there are some very smart and influential people at the top of the symbolic pyramid know that certain people will crack it. They'll know. And each time that they do, they're discredited, have an apparent accident, or they just disappear. And I think what's wonderful is that more and more people now are surfacing, whereas all of this, paranormal literature and ideas were considered bogus back in the 70s and 80s. If you look now, you'll see that it's becoming very apparent that more and more people they smelled a rat because they've woken up to the fact that we're all being controlled. Well, most of us are being lied to. Well, all of us are being lied to. We're being shown dumb programs that just, that are equivalent to a 12-year-old's intellect. We go to work, there's squabbles and pathetic things going on at work to keep you down. It's ridiculous. We're going around in this circle and no one's really stopping to say, hang on a minute, who am I? What am I? Where do I come from? Where am I going? And why am I here? And I think many people I've spoken to with regards to, when I've spoken to them after the readings, they're asking these questions. And I said, well, you have your own ideas, about our purpose here. And we have to try and work it out. But I can tell you categorically, I know where I'm from and I know where we're all from. And my truths are to share with other people, however radical they may be. Not many people, will understand that. I'll have those people against those very, ideas that I have. But at least I'm trying very hard to, put the pieces to the puzzle together with UFOs and the soul survival and all that type of phenomena.
It's a very complex puzzle. Andy, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a deep subject, and this could go on for hours and hours.
Multi-complex. Yeah,
it's fascinating to listen to. So, Philip, there's a theory out there, you probably heard it, about the white light being a kind of traction device, like in Star Wars, to suck a soul into whatever prison kind of system there is, and then kind of bounce it back into a reincarnated body. What's your theory on that?
Well, my opinion on that is a little bit mixed. I'm not doubting it, but the only thing that I can say is that most of the people that have crossed over that I communicate with, but basically seem to be on a higher level. They never cry out saying, I'm stuck, help. Now, I do understand there's been a lot of emphasis on this false light theory. And from what I understand is that most people are tricked into, believing that they're talking to loved ones and really their soul is propelled back into another form and they go through the whole process of reincarnation again, so they can't actually get out of the Earth system. It has been said that we are a prison planet. I am not doubting that, but I believe that there is a war that's been going on with souls, a war of souls. Good title there. And I also believe that, the darker elements of this warring faction want us here to stay here as the slave species, as it were. I don't know. I've got some mixed feelings. I know there was a book that was written by an author who had actually been in contact with one of the nurses that had allegedly been in communication with the EBE, extraterrestrial biological entity, that had crashed, one of the survivors from the Roswell crash. And this EBE had told this doctor that we're prisoners, souls trapped on this airplane and can't get out. I don't believe that. I believe that there is redemption for all of us. Not everything we see is, something that borders along the lines of, delusional. I think that what people experienced is very true to them. And I think from a soul level, you will know your truths. You will know what is true to you. I think this whole fear factor, it could be designed as well to try and put the fear of God into people. Religion has done that for centuries, control people, and that's coming from something that's holier than thou, and the light and God. And yet most people have been, fear that they might be judged and punished and go to hell. I mean, it's a theme that's carried on for centuries. So in my terminology, I believe that the human soul will find its own passage through eternity, and it'll find its way back to the other side. Certainly, I've been told before that all of the things I've been dealing with are demonic. I don't believe that. I believe that I've had some form of connection with lower entities. That much is true. Doesn't make me a bad person. I'm just looking for my truth. So I find that theory a little bit complex. I think we need to, look into that a little bit more. But certainly, in my opinion, from the way that I do my readings and communications, I've never had any problems from those on the other side saying, "Help, get me out of here." And then you get people saying, "Well, he's tricked. He's the devil's tricking him." What a load of rubbish,
Well, the thing about that is when people, and I've had sort of debates with people about this, when they're saying, "Oh, it's demons. They know all about your grandma, and they know this, that, and the other." And I say, well, look, if there is demons, then you got to at least look at it from your point of view and say, well, the demons obviously won the day, because they've lifted my spirits and made me feel much better after I had that reading. Whereas picking up the Bible and listening to Jesus stuff hasn't done anything.
That's right.
How do you answer that one, holy person?
Yeah. I mean, I am exploring this in another book. Now, what's interesting is that the book that I was intending to write was going to be called You, the Public Deceive, the Grand UFO Deception. But A Passage to Eternity seemed to take over. It seemed to pull me into that area. And, of course, I wanted to write A Passage to Eternity. And now I am focusing on You, the Public Deceive, the Grand UFO Deception, which is a new project that I'm working on. I'm on chapter 2 now, and that will go into more detail about the soul's journey, and of course the theoretical ideas that need to be explored with regards to our true heritage, the soul's sojourn, as it's called. So yeah, I'm exploring that in more detail, in much more detail in that new book that I'm working on. So I hope to get that book finished by the middle of next year and out around that time.
Now, I've heard some crazy things about what happens to us when we die, and again, the communications I've had, none of them have mentioned it, but. John Lear, the son of the famous Lear Jet guy, who talks a lot about aliens and secret saucers and crash retrievals and things like that. He says that there's like a radar dish or a beacon or a tower on the moon where all the souls that die on this planet go up through this tunnel of light, and they're taken and stored as energy in this tower on the moon by aliens, which I thought, I can't see that somehow. Maybe
it could be that the structures on the moon. I mean, I'm no doubting that there was an advanced civilization, and there perhaps still is underground. The reason that the space program is a big farce is because they didn't go there, or they've been warned off. But I personally believe that my own opinion is that we're finding problems today getting past the Earth's Van Allen belt and so on and so forth. But it could be that the tower is maybe a signaling system to try and control. I don't believe that it's sucking human souls in its energy. I think that's taking it a little bit further. I think we have to stay within the grounds of theoretical debate that doesn't go off too far, that would throw people and put the fear of God into people. Because when you're dealing with aspects of the soul, Does Mr. Lear know about communication with mediums and souls that have crossed over?
Yeah, he
So
talks about aircraft, secret aircraft, and then suddenly launches into this after death state. You think, I've never heard him talk about that before. And it's
No.
like he could be a misinformation person, couldn't he? That throws all
Well,
these
I
things
mean,
to confuse us.
I mean, you know, this whole thing about the disinformation project, I mean, it's going to happen everywhere. And sometimes there are stories of where the system gets to certain people and use them. Money talks, you see. If you give someone enough money, they'll do anything. I'm not saying that Mr. Lear is, this has happened to him, but we have to be careful. First of all, we have to, research and look into things. If you're proclaiming that, it's a little bit of something that can't be proven. Yet mediums can prove that there is life after death. Mediums also state that the people seem to be quite happy. I've also had the experience of passing over, and I've had these other experiences where I've seen the other side. And I believe that's happening because maybe something happened to me that opened up an area of the mind that's previously closed, because we're all on a narrow field of conscious awareness, you see. We can only record all our experiences here on a narrow band of awareness. When we cross over, because the human brain has served its purpose in recording all the experiences through this life, consciousness is removed outside of its physical matrix and returns back to its original source. People call it the other side. So I believe that's what's happening, and that some people, maybe their awareness has opened a little bit more where these certain other dimensional frequencies come in and affect the person, or certainly interact with them on some level. But to say that souls are being, chomped up by some tower or use this energy, I'm sorry, I can't go down that road. I understand.
Yeah,
No.
it's. I'd much believe in the clangers than that one. And for those that don't know the clangers, search it out on YouTube. You won't regret it. I mean, what about the whole thing of the aliens? I mean, if they're coming through different dimensions, my thinking is that they would be totally aware of the life after death experiences of humans. And you kind of touched upon this with your thesis, haven't you, about spirits in the material world and that kind of thing.
Yes.
And they're looking for their own kind of soul to connect with, or fractions of the greys are. Can you explain a bit about that, Philip?
Yeah, well, if I cloned you, you're a natural process of reproduction. You've come through the proper channels of incarnation and reincarnation. So basically, you have memories afterwards and going forward. You have memories on the other side. You have memories from past, present, future. If I cloned you, let's say 100 times, 1,000 times, the clone would be a physical copy of yourself, but it will only have one life experience. It won't go through the proper channels that you've gone through incarnation, reincarnation, through the spirit world. So the copy will only have one physical existence, and when it dies, it probably is outside the field of creation. So that soul can't reconnect where you've gone to. So my idea in a theoretical model is that if extraterrestrials have cloned themselves, and this is what's happened to their souls, they've gravitated to a one-mind hive consciousness, where they have found a plane that very strangely reproduces. And you've got to ask yourself the question, especially with regards to the greys, which are very famous within UFO literature, is that you hear all these stories of these abductions and why they're interested in some form of hybridization program, of rebirthing. So we were only ever told the stories of, like, physical crafts, aliens come down, they abduct someone, they scream, they do all these horrible things to them, but not understanding what's going on. Now, I met with Dr. David Jacobs, and his ideas are slightly different from mine, but all due respect to the good doctor himself. I love the guy, I think he's great. But my thesis was basically that the cloned souls of the greys, they don't understand about color, aging, taste, empathy, none of these things that make us human. They're trying to understand more about themselves through us, I believe, and they're creating this hybridization program to somehow interject their spark of a soul into that life form for it to be able to grow and develop like a human. And that's why sometimes the mother is brought back onto these ships to bond with the hybrid. Very strange, to show it compassion and love, to try and give the hybrid some form of, understanding of these qualities that we have as humans that they don't. And do the greys probably think on a spiritual level that that once the hybrid dies, that the soul inside that was once a clone is whole, and it can return back to some form of everlasting life. I mean, it's just a theory, and it's very complex, and I'm just skimming across the surface here. But it appears to me that the Greys are interested in us as sentient reproductive beings, souls. That's something that sniffs suspect, because the Greys have no understanding. They know how we work. They know how the mind works. But it's almost as if they're yearning for something more. They're trying to look for something more. There's also the hypothesis, this is another thing that I'm drawing parallels in with my new book, is are the Greys guardians of the souls? We don't know. They're ancient. I mean, I remembered the one I saw on board that craft, and the other strange character, they seem ancient, and it could be that that there's something about the soul with them, Andy and Neil. I'm telling you now, they are interested in the human soul, and it is something to do with the soul. It's not just because they're interested in creating a new race to take over the earth. It's something to do about us, and they haven't got it, and they want it. So theoretically speaking, we've got to look at the spiritual ramifications involved, that if we start cloning ourselves, will that clone have a soul? And because it may not have a past or a present or a future. It only has the memory of one single life. And if that's the case, on a theoretical level, when that physical clone dies, the spark may not be enough to get it back into the loop of creation. So this is where the idea of the download came back in 1996, and the idea to extend upon the hypothesis came many years later. I'm still tweaking the model and trying to put bits together. But as I said, it may be disproven, but at least I'm giving it a go to try and work out what the Greys are, why they're doing what they're doing, and why they're interested in reproduction. Very strange. Very strange.
Because I've read the Greys, or some of the Greys have, ones that they've interviewed, supposedly in Area 51, or maybe it just the alien in or something. But they've supposedly referred to us humans as containers.
Yes,
which
yes,
suggests correct. Containers of souls someone has put forward.
Correct.
So that kind of ties in with it, doesn't it?
Correct. And the thing is, though, the thing I was looking for is that, the download that I got, I don't know who gave me the download. I don't know where it came from. They call it a download. It was like a moment of revelation. I'm sure it came from something else. I'm not accredited for it. And I've said that in my book. But I think that we're dealing with entities that are old, they're ancient. There's been a war going on, a warring of souls. They could even be the Nephilim. We don't know. They could be the guardians of the lower dead, or those that prefer to exist in the lower astral planes, that are trying to find a way back into our world physically. And there's another hypothesis we have to take into consideration that I have thought about. Could these specters be, bringing us into their vibration and somehow amalgamating a new species to bring their souls into our realm to take over? I mean, it sounds like science fiction, but these accounts are true. They're really happening. Abductions are happening. The Greys are very much part of UFO literature. I doubt very much that we're all hallucinating. It made me laugh once when I heard someone say, it's because people have seen Close Encounters, or, they've watched too many science fiction programs. Well, if that's the case, why would being abducted by Darth Vader or stormtroopers, or even better, Daleks, or, whizzed off with Harry Potter? If this is a mass hallucination, which I do not believe at all, I believe that, we need to look at it sensibly. I think the Greys are real. I think they operate on a higher frequency of awareness. I think they're interested in us as a species because we can reproduce, and we have attributes that they themselves have lost or no longer have. And I think, this may warn us as a race about the dangers of cloning. It's all very well to clone an organ or a body part. That's fine. When they start cloning people, this might be the downfall of our species. Indeed, going back into the antediluvian cultures, we've been, told that Atlantis didn't exist. They're finding, proof that those civilizations did exist, and that we may have been in our glory years before we mucked it all up. And here we are again. We're just about on the edge of a catalysm, I believe, with regards to the revelations of good and bad, trying to, reach a zenith of brilliance. And then we're corrupted once again.
Well, I think we're actually drawing to a close here on the Paranormal Peep Show. It's been a fascinating couple of hours listening and chatting with Philip Kinsella, who is the co-host of Twin Souls Radio. Philip, are you got anything planned coming up? I mean, you talked about, obviously, we've got your book here, which is A Passage Through Eternity, which is available on Amazon and other online bookstores, I presume, as well.
Yeah, I'm going to do an audio book of that one as well. I'm planning to do an audio of A Passage Through Eternity, and I did it through Amazon because my other two publishers passed over from Pegasus Books and obviously John Day from Cable Band. So I thought, other research is going through Amazon, and I'm working on You, the Public, Deceive, the Grand UFO Deception, which is how we've all been hoodwinked to believe that it's all nuts and bolts construct, and there's a far more complex process involved of disinformation and why the public are being lied to. So, and I'm working on that and, trying to get those bits together. So it's a lot of work, like all of us when we've got things to do, but hopefully I should, as I said, get that new one finished by the middle of next year if things go to plan.
Cool. Well, good luck.
So if I'm not abducted.
Andy, any final quick words before we go?
No, just that it's been very fascinating. It could have gone on for hours and hours more, and hopefully we'll have Philip back again some point.
Great, yeah. We'd look forward to hearing more about your projects, Philip, in the future. You've got a website, which is philip-kinsella.com, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. And, you just Google me or whatever. But I really do appreciate coming on your show, and I'm very grateful for the support as well. It's always interesting to, share our ideas. You get attacked most of the time by other people who don't understand. But I think it's good to pool all of our resources and ideas together as units as opposed to separate. So
absolutely.
Brilliant.
Oh, well, champion that cause, yeah. Well, thank you very much once again. It's a good night from ourselves. You can listen to us on downloads on the various download websites, which is like Stitcher, iTunes, Podbean, things like that. But you've been listening to the Paranormal Peep Show with our guest Philip Kinsella and myself, Neil Geddes-Ward, and Andy Chaplin.
Till the next time, see you later.
Cheerio, everyone. Good night.
God bless. Thank you.